If the U.S. isn't going to run deficits, run up debt to supply the dollars to the world, who will? No one else will. The Chinese won't, and no one else can, and that is correct. And the answer is then you're going to have to settle deficits in something else that is nobody else's debt, nobody else's liability, and that is gold. And I think that's where this is going, which is, and I think it's part of the reason why the U.S. is actually buying gold, is to try to turbocharge this change to the system. When you hear President Trump say we want to go back to tariffs and cut income taxes, when you hear Marco Rubio in his confirmation hearing say within 10 years we are going to be dependent on China for everything if we do not take aggressive actions to change and start to reshore, change this currency system and reshore. When you have Senator Vance say what he said in 2023 to Powell about the dollar increasingly being a resource curse, about which Vance is very familiar, having grown up in West Virginia and Southern Ohio and seeing the deindustrialization. The chapter and verse, this administration understands this problem.
What the current Vice President J.D. Vance said to the Fed chairman.
So in 2023, he said that the dollar shows the hallmarks of a resource curse, which is it's often called Dutch disease. I might refer to it as there, which is effectively, if you're Saudi Arabia and you discover that you are the biggest, lowest cost producer of oil, you produce a lot of oil and the rest of your economy shrivels up and does nothing. It withers away. And it ultimately becomes a strategic handicap or a strategic risk.
And you get corruption every time.
Exactly. And Vance's point was that the dollar's reserve status, we are the Saudi Arabia of money. That's how the system has worked for 50 years. We produce the world's reserve currency. We're the Saudi Arabia of money. And what has followed is the hollowing out of industries other than those most closely tied to the money printer, to the dollar. Washington, Wall Street. And his point is it is becoming this resource curse of being the Saudi Arabia of money is increasingly not good for the American middle class, the American working class, the U.S. defense establishment. He specifically cited our inability to produce shells for Ukraine in his question to Powell in 2023. And you can find this online. You can Google it. I think it was April or March of 2023. And so it showed a fundamental understanding of this connection between the structure of the dollar system over the last 50 years and the situation in which we find ourselves, where our defense industrial base is so hollowed out and our debt level so high, we cannot credibly fight a war against our major adversaries without them supplying us. And our debt is so high that they can weaponize our debt against us. And so ultimately, I think the strategic reason why we're starting to see gold re-enter the conversation, why central banks have been buying gold for 10 to 12 years, why the U.S. we're likely moving to a system advocated for by the policies of the United States, if not outright saying, hey, we want gold to be we want gold to be a neutral reserve asset. But we can see the policies, and they are functionally indistinguishable from saying we want gold to be the neutral reserve asset. I think what we're going to do is move toward a system where the foreign capital flows, basically we bring factories, we put tariffs on, we lower income taxes, U.S. consumer spending rises, the dollar, we start to see foreigners send goods here, also pay us tariffs, start to reinvest in our factories instead of just buying our treasury bonds and our financial assets. Employment goes up, building goes up, growth goes up. Ultimately, though, if they're not recycling their dollars into, they can only put so much in factories. They're not putting them in treasury bonds anymore. They haven't for some time. What are they going to put it in if they have a surplus left over from dealing with us? Where are they going to put their surplus dollars, et cetera? I think the answer is gold. And I think the flows of gold, the longer we go where the tariff story, it's just tariffs and it just keeps coming and it just keeps coming, which I'm hearing is still to this point continuing to keep coming, gold flowing in. The more likely, in my opinion, when married with the pronouncements from Trump, Rubio, Vance, Stephen Mirren, the Council of Economic Advisors, Bessent, the more likely it is that these flows of gold into the U.S. are effectively front-running what will likely be a higher price of gold, driven there by the recycling of global trade more into gold and less into U.S. financial assets than has been the case over the last 50 years.
It's just an incredible story. If what you're saying is right, it's incredible because really it's not. It's a move toward the fundamentals, toward the past. It's actually moving backward. What you're saying is the future is like building more factories and buying more gold. Really? I thought we were moving to a far more abstract. I mean, I'm thrilled by it. Let me just say. But it's the opposite of what I think many of us anticipate, which is a world that is increasingly abstract. And you're describing a world that is increasingly concrete. Lent is here, the period before Easter, the 40 days, and it's a unique chance to get closer to God. That's the point of it. Hallow, the world's #1 prayer app, can help you do that. Joining their Prayer 40 Challenge, it's a great way to connect with Christians all over the world and unite in preparation for Easter, which is the payoff of this season. It's called The Way. It helps participants focus on how Jesus is the way to heaven. If you join the challenge, you'll embark on a spiritual journey with some of America's most convicted Jesus followers. Powerful stories, prayer, you grow in your ability to sacrifice. That's what Lent is. It's a sacrifice. And taking thought-provoking sermons and true stories of faith in action, which are amazing. This year is going to be the best Lent ever. Thousands of people praying together all over the world, and you can be part of it through Hallow, which, by the way, is in use in my house and a nightly topic of conversation. So you can sign up at hallow.com/Tucker. When you join, check out thousands of guided prayers, meditations, music, and everything. There's a ton on Hallow, all designed to help you find peace and closeness to God. Download the Hallow app and jump onto the Lent Pray 40 Challenge right now.
I think,
or an economy,
yeah. And I think there will still be growth in services and the abstractions and these things. This doesn't mean technology stops progressing. And when I say factories, I would use the broadest possible definition of factory, right? So
we're
if
making
you're
things,
you're
right.
making things,
robotic factories,
correct.
But they're making things
exactly. And that I think is where this is going. And again, critically, I think the reason it's going there. And I think the reason these policymakers, again, Trump, Besson, Rubio, Vance, like chapter and verse, is it has become clear that the status quo dollar system has become an acute national security threat to the United States on two fronts. We can't make weapons, which we keep hearing. We can't make them fast enough to credibly defend our allies and project power. And our debt has gotten so high that too has become a national security threat. And this sort of checks both boxes of in terms of this systemic change. It makes America great again.
I mean, that's an amazing story that you're telling. I guess here's the fly in the ointment. There's an entire class of people, some of the richest people in our society, some of whom I know, you know too, who've gotten, rich beyond the dreams of Croesus by really doing nothing and adding nothing, just as parasites on the financial system. You probably would be more generous than I am in describing what they do, but they're useless people who've looted the country, but they're really powerful. They're the biggest donors, and so they're going to stand by and just let their world collapse.
Well,
I don't think so.
I mean, I don't. It's one of these things where I think. What's Charlie Munger say? You show me an incentive, I'll show you an outcome. Right? It was one of Charlie Munger's famous quotes. Yeah. And so I don't see them as parasites or whatever. I think I see them as rational people responding to it.
They are. I don't think you can stand back and say like, I don't know. I don't want to be too mean. I don't want to be too mean, but like it's harder for the layman me to understand sort of the added value. Is that the term that they use? Of some of these, quote, industries. It all seems fake. It all seems sort of the product of short-term thinking. It seems very mercenary. It seems disconnected from the national interest. It seems greedy, among other things, and basically disgusting. And it hasn't made the country stronger. It's made it, in fact, weaker. It's made the country you just described.
Sure.
It's like totally overwhelmed by debt and can't even produce artillery shells.
Think about it, right? So like the system we set up, when you're the Saudi Arabia of money, as we've been since 71, you're going to have dollar Dutch disease. This is the resource curse Vance
Yes.
talked about in 23.
Right.
And so you're going to have two sectors grow to the detriment of all other sectors. Federal government
Yep.
and finance, insurance, real estate,
Right.
the fire industry, finance. Now, both of those industries are absolutely, and I'm not calling them parasites, but they are parasitic industries. They make money
Oh, I know.
by taking a small cut of everything that comes in.
Yeah.
And if you just think about this intuitively, biologically, in the natural world, if you have a small parasite on you, you have a small, gut parasite, it takes a little bit of every meal you eat. Maybe you don't feel 100%, but you're fine. The parasite does great, and you're fine.
Right.
At some point, the parasite gets so big, if it's allowed to get so big, that it's taking too many of your calories, you start to wither and you die ultimately.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. We hope you'll subscribe to it. And by the way, you can hit the little bell on there and get notifications every time we produce a video. We hope you'll do that also.